the Dean of the School of International Relations at Jawaharlal Nehru University. He joins us now live from Delhi. Welcome to the program. So I was just discussing there with my colleague Melinda the issue of the joint communique, the divisions there at the G20. What's your feeling there? Because her point was, of course, India and China being neutral on Russia, and the fact that this could lead to maybe having no consensus at the end of this G20, no communique. How significant would that be?
Thank you very much, Maria. I think the main point in G20 is related to the economic recovery of the globe. We have seen the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, creating havoc in terms of trade, in terms of economic growth rates, in terms of intensifying the income inequalities across the spectrum. And there is also the supply chain mechanism which has been disrupted. So number one, the G20 is looking at the economic recovery process. On the other hand, the Russian invasion of Ukraine had created conditions for the fuel, fertilizer, and food crises. Inflation has gone up across the board in many countries. And 20 as an economic grouping since over a decade ago. If you look at the G20 agenda, this has been the main point. So I think the effort here is how do we resurrect economic growth rates? How do we come back to the supply chain management issues?
Okay, but my question was...
I think that is the main arena that the G20 is now focused on.
Okay, but my question was the following. My question was on the consensus there of those 20 world representatives. Of course, President Putin is not there, but reaching a consensus, getting a final communique, how likely will that be, given the divisions that we're seeing because of the war in Ukraine?
There are differences within the G20 grouping, specifically on the political issues. But when it is related to the economic aspects, there has been a lot of consensus with which actually the G20 has been established, specifically on food prices, fuel prices, energy prices, and of course the inflation. So at the macroeconomic level, the G20 would suggest to a few economic recovery mechanisms at the macroeconomic level. I think that is broadly the consensus among the G20 countries.
Okay, now, you know, one of the biggest events there was that meeting between President Xi Jinping and President Biden. How significant was that? What do you make of that meeting? And is Xi still a friend of Russia, or is he more, you know, a friend of the world?
I think after the 4 virtual meetings, phone calls between President Biden and President Xi Jinping, this is the first time a physical meeting has been arranged. And as the 2 largest economies in the world, their responses are very significant. And it appeared the main theme was on the nuclear issue. As you know, President Putin had threatened to use nuclear weapons on Ukraine, which Foreign Minister Lavrov reiterated. This has created a lot of concern in Eurasia, in Europe, in NATO countries. And that was also the main theme. When German Chancellor visited China, this was again the main carrying point that the Chancellor had with the Chinese president. And in this meeting with Biden, there is a mention about the opposition to any nuclear kind of action in Ukraine. So there is a certain consensus that is emerging, at least on the nuclear issue. And China seems to be distancing from Russia from the February 4th limitless cooperation to that of some caveats that have now come about in the Chinese perspective. This is welcome because of the continuing crises in Ukraine And the Chinese ambassador to Ukraine, Fan Xiaoming, also had reiterated his support to the Ukrainian reconstruction, as well as for the vaccination and food supply, uniforms, clothes, a mid-course correction that has been
Shrikant,
attempted in China.
Okay, we've
However,
run out
we may
of time.
be reading too much into this. We need to further.
All right, Shrikant Kondapalli, our